Hi, and welcome to our next episode for the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm Matt Duke from the South Texas Business Lawyers, and today I'm going to be talking with Andrew from Southside Craft Soda. If you don't know about Southside Craft Soda, this is a consumer packaged good, a CPG brand that is taking on the country by storm. And Andrew's going to talk about three things with me today. He's going to talk about the story of how Southside Craft Soda came to be, deep into the roots of South San Antonio, bottling it up for the entire country to be able to experience. He's going to talk about what it means to create the marketing around a CPG. He's got rich experience with big brands and even startup brands, and he's going to talk about how do you create those mini billboards. And then the last thing he's going to talk about is what it takes to actually get that CPG on the shelf and the process that he's gone through and continue to go through for this high growth company. I'm so glad that you've made it today, and I can't wait for you to get into this episode. Let's get in it now. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on here to talk about Southside Craft Soda. We've talked a lot about it. In fact, we've just been talking about it before we turned on here. And I think that you're not a hidden gem because a lot of people know about you, but I don't think they realize the depth of the story and the brand that you have created with you and your co-founders. And let's talk about that. Talk about the birth of Southside Craft Soda. Like, what was the journey for you that got you to where you are today?
Right. So I've always grown up fascinated about, I'm obviously from the south side of San Antonio, and that's where the name comes from. Fascinated about how and why things are created and how those things are created and why can't we do those things from certain parts of San Antonio. Sure. So I kind of always have been an underdog, I always feel like I might have done things the hardest way possible. It's just like, Said almost every single entrepreneur looking back down the road they came. Well, there's an easier path, wasn't there? So, but I chose the path of, I'm a graphic designer by trade, went to Southwest Texas State University, grew up. My father was a neighborhood activist. Okay. And so he was really into, and I'm the youngest, so I kind of was dragged along to see a lot of things, right, in terms of, San Antonio, South San Antonio in the mid to late 80s, right, and some of that disparity. And so more so then than now, we've come a long way. So I kind of was formed in that idea. My parents were very good at exposing me to things, showing me things, but also I think my father was really big on education and going to school, right, and getting a college degree and that sort of thing. And then they've got me involved in they've encouraged me, heavily to do a lot of things that maybe my peers weren't doing at the time. But most importantly, I think they taught me the value of my neighborhood and my culture, right? And I feel like that kind of was the basis for everything that I was doing. So as I would maybe travel be able to go to Chicago or Austin or wherever, being able to see things and going like, why isn't that happening where I'm from? Right. And I just had that curiosity. Right. I had that curiosity about why aren't those things happening where I'm from? So in order to make some extra cash, after I got my graphic design, I worked for an ad agency, got to see some of the, we were able to work on as an junior art director. Right. After I got my design degree from Texas State, was able to be a junior art director, worked on the Spurs account for a moment. Those early days, again, just kind of seeing advertising and marketing in San Antonio. And then I decided I needed to have a change, and I went and worked at Blue Star Contemporary Art Center. Oh, okay. Right. So again, you're kind of starting to see this molding of who I am. Right. Right. Especially within the community. Right. And so got the Spurs thing. Was on the ad team that did a few championships. went to the art center.
Just a few championships.
Yeah. then I went to the art center, and Bill Fitzgibbons. You got to be around a very eclectic group of San Antonians, right? Because you had the funders of the arts, and you had the artists themselves, and sort of that sort of cross section of being a part of that community for a moment,
right?
And then that's kind of where it all started, right? It was I need to supplement my income, so I became a freelance graphic designer.
Got it.
And then because I kind of grew up in politics and understood the dynamics of the city, used some of those networking opportunities to get projects.
Okay.
And then by the time you knew it, I was getting more projects that I could, handle as a freelance graphic designer. And this was 07, 08, really the beginning of the gig economy. Is
right.
What I kind of call it. This is when internet got faster. You didn't have to physically drop stuff off at people's offices anymore.
Facebook was starting to begin its route into our lives.
Right. And so, did a lot of that, and was very fortunate early on to during the recession in 07, as the economy was shifting. Had a friend in college who's Thane, whose girlfriend Amy worked at Dell Computers, and I really was they asked me if I could help them because they were adjusting their advertising agency structure, because his economy was doing its big adjustment. The
Great Recession.
The Great Recession, exactly. Yeah. And so then I remember they gave me a couple of projects, and never stepped again, the beginning of the gig economy.
Right.
And this is all fascinating at the time because,
there was no Upwork at the time. There was no Fiverr or anything like that.
And I didn't have to go to Round Rock. I never went to Round Rock. Never stepped foot. I worked with an entire Dell team on their, as a freelance graphic designer.
Wow.
Right? As a freelance, and worked with their teams in New York, all from the south side of San Antonio.
Wow.
Right? And that to me was the epiphany, right? And the epiphany was, you can do this from anywhere. And why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing more of this here?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, and mind you, my first office, it's really crazy because I think now there's a lot of startups that are, they're hearing my story, they hear my story and like, I'm doing that now. It's like, we were the beginning.
But there was no geekdom back then, right? Yeah. There was not these office sharing type things that are out there. People are like, well, that sounds about right. It's like, no, I literally was in the garage.
Yeah, we had, we had one, and mind you, at the time, I lived about 3 houses down from my parents, as any good Southside family would do. They all live on the same street, right? And
there you go.
So my parents had the internet.
Okay.
And I had the bubble MacBook, right?
Bubble MacBook.
And we were putting stuff on, burning CDs. That was exciting. Right, because we could burn stuff.
And you had the zip drive. So
people
are like, what the heck is a zip drive? It was a really fat disc that none of y'all will ever see. I've got some in a file somewhere.
Yeah, and so to me, if you have an opportunity and you can recognize the opportunity, you take full advantage of it. I knew that the Dell project, every opportunity they were giving me, I had to make sure to take it, to the top, to the best level that I could possibly take it.
Right.
And I remember doing a few projects, but then one day, and I think anybody that's in the tech industry would appreciate this. One day they asked me, hey, can you do static graphics for websites? Can I? That's like the dream job, It's like the dream job because it's just, I'm just uploading, JPEGs or whatever it was to you guys, and there's no paper, nothing, and I'm charging you. And mind you, at the time for me, their rate was like, and they're the ones that suggested the rate because I undercharged them. So because I didn't know anything,
There's another lesson that we're going to get to on there. So, are you charging market rates for your soda now, Andrew?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So then you go. So then they suggested I increase my rates because they actually felt bad paying me what I thought. Because at the time I always said it's like we didn't have as many mentors or resources that we have now.
Right.
So credit to San Antonio, kudos to San Antonio for that part of it.
Yeah.
And so had no idea what to charge. And so now at that point it was like $85 an hour and minimum 1 hour of work. So I think that after I'd done a couple of small projects, they turned around and gave me 100 static web banners.
Wow.
And that's all I was doing. And I quit my nonprofit job and I bought me a swimming pool from Walmart.
one of those blue ones or one of the bigger ones?
Bigger ones. And I bought me a raft because from now on I'm gonna swim in the pool at lunchtime. I thought that was so fun.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So fast forward.
Tell me you have a picture of that.
Yeah. So fast forward. I had my marketing company. I brought on a partner.
Okay.
Who had consumer packaged goods background.
Okay.
That's really when I started kind of examining CPG beverage in San Antonio.
Okay.
Right? Because she had come from Procter & Gamble experience, had moved to San Antonio, right? Kind of had really heavy.
I mean, that's heavy CPG right there.
Yeah, heavy CPG.
I mean, brands.
Right, and she was a strategist. She was a genius. Still is. And I needed to find customers. In San Antonio, our CPG space, and I was trying to find customers that she could work on because she was really good.
Right. And you can leverage that skill set.
And where were they? And we were looking for them, and we couldn't really find them. And so then I kind of had a strategy in my head. I said, well, there's really only two ways marketing companies grow. It's either somebody that's in charge of a big budget and
can get that big contract.
Yeah, can get that big contract.
Yep.
Or you ride a rocket ship, a company that's starting.
Yep.
And they're on their way up, and you can grow with them.
That's right.
And so that's there's really no other way. Or you start your own. It's just like that's the third part.
Are you about to walk me through almost all three of those?
Yeah. So then we ended up one of the number one, I guess, the pillar in all of this was we couldn't find really any CPG customers in the market.
And what time period is this at?
This is probably
2015, 20.
Yeah, about 2015, right? Really nothing out there in terms of startups and food and beverage. The only place that was really coming where I could really find some stuff was actually through the International Affairs Office.
Oh, wow.
Where you were seeing Mexican companies looking to expand to the U.S., and they were looking to San Antonio as maybe their first step into the American market.
Okay.
Right? And so then at the time, the Free Trade Alliance is now part of the economic development, but the Free Trade Alliance, we signed a contract with them to do product to market reports.
Okay.
So that really was kind of the foray in my mind, how to build marketing strategy and planning, and having a fantastic partner who understood sort of that strategy, acting as a pseudo mentor, right? Because you can kind of see how these things were playing out.
Right.
Got to work with and got to meet a bunch of companies from Mexico, a bunch of products. We did a few reports, how to launch your product from San Antonio.
Okay.
One of my best friends came out of there, Jesus Sebastian. They own Guacamole Avocado Company. He's still based in San Antonio, but they do a lot of co-packing for Kroger's and Subway.
Okay.
And their plants are down in Michoacan. And so he became a really good friend. And then I just started poking around here locally, and really the brewery scene was about to start.
Yep. The craft breweries were around 2015 starting to come into play.
And so then Blue Star, I'd met Eugene, the owner of Alamo Brewery.
Okay.
He was the beer guy
Yep.
during the first Fridays, right? So then as I was freelancing, I'd see him and I'd ping him, and eventually I told him that I would work for beer, and at that time our business partnership kind of split.
Okay.
She went and did her own thing. I ended up, strangely enough, ended up with all these feelers out for CPG.
Okay.
Because I was the sales guy.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, he comes in, right? He comes in and says, "Okay, we're ready. I'm ready to do some stuff." So I start working with Eugene at Alamo Brewery. Serendipity, my office that I had downtown, Adam's Extract and Spices marketing team moves next door.
Oh, okay.
How
about that?
Yeah, no, they became a fantastic customer for me for almost 6-7 years. I mean, that just ended recently, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because I was their package designer.
Okay.
Right. So any Adams product out there, I probably designed it.
So you're in my pantry right now.
Yeah. So you
got lots of stuff.
Exactly.
In there.
Yeah. So and again, producing, trying to keep that work at a high level.
Yep.
Right, because you're dealing with emerging brands, national brands, historic brands.
That's right.
And then finally, Jesus came in as a customer. So there I had, for a moment, I was working on Alamo Brewery, Adam's Extract, Jesus, right, and the Guacamole Company.
Wow.
And that was my portfolio, and they were all kind of growing, emerging brands. And then I landed a project with Big Red Zero to help them with their brand activation during Fiesta.
Oh, okay.
And that came via, I was the creator of the Big Red and Barbacoa Facebook page.
Oh, wow.
And back when Facebook, again, early adopter, back when that started, and I handed over the keys to Big Red, and nobody at Big Red corporate at the time reached back out to me. I was like, "Hey, I've got this thing," had like 30,000 followers. The only person that reached back was their CEO,
wow.
Gary, and Gary Smith. And Gary, he was a former COO over at Red Bull and whatever. And then anyway, so it had Big Red.
Wow.
So I started with my marketing company, those 4 companies.
Yeah.
And that's really where, I think that's really I was building sort of the cache of customers that were in the CPG space. The food scene, CIA was moving in more chef-driven restaurants.
You mean, for the viewers, that's the Culinary Institute of America, is not actually the
right.
Not really the spooks. Right. No CIA's doing anything in the food around here.
Yeah.
Stuff.
The Culinary Institute, right? CIA. Yeah, that is funny. Think about
I knew what you meant, but you never know. They're like, hey, he's talking about the CIA over there on beer.
It took a dark turn. Dark turn.
So you've gotten all this experience, and you've got on helping establish brands grow, right? And then tell me about what grew then with Alamo, and then how that got us over to Southside.
I think the one thing with Alamo, and I give, since they were an emerging brand, they were kind of starting a lot of their marketing and being a part of how they were marketing in San Antonio, and I think Eugene's philosophy of creating an approachable craft beer, Alamo Golden Ale, especially in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Right. We're hardcore, Bud Light, Miller Light. Not
anymore.
Yeah, it's changing. It is changing. So that was kind of what we're used to.
Right.
And so hanging out with them and their team when they opened the brewery, going to the different bars and restaurants.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of really enjoyed that aspect of the business.
Mm-hmm.
I still do. I still enjoy being able to go and see what people are doing on the food and beverage side. And really just that exposure of, I think that being able to I think of it in this term. When I walked into the brewery the first time, it was just like this amazing place. Like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
My son, who's 15, walks in the brewery, and it's just like, it's normal.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that to me is sort of the representation of, I'm happy that it's normal for him,
That's
that
right.
he can see this, he's exposed to it. It's not something that's a wild dream.
Right.
It's attainable. Right. And I think that's what all parents want for their
Exactly.
kids, to not feel intimidated, right, or afraid.
That's right.
That they know that they can access these things. And so fast forward, I get trying to figure out what I'm gonna do next.
Yeah.
I think I'd been in marketing. I had the company already for 10 years, and I was trying to think of like, okay, San Antonio, especially for marketing companies, it is a gig. It's a gig market.
Sure.
You know, this is not a heavy retainer.
That's right.
You're not going to get, you're not going to get it's very difficult to get the long term. So you got to be constantly hustling.
Right.
Now, I loved it. You know, I mean,
but it gets kind of tiring
But
sometimes.
after 10 years, it's just like, there's got to be another way to do this. Right?
That's right.
So then I took a break, somewhat of a break. Got hired on as a consultant at the South Chamber.
Okay.
And now the South Texas Business Partnership got hired to help establish their economic development foundation, which is now Southside First.
Okay.
So I was the interim executive director, kind of the political component. Again, grew up on the South Side, grew up in politics, all that's there.
Right.
And understood, and I think this is one of those things that you either understand this or not, that there's a little bit of political equity built just because of what Dad was doing, because of what I was doing. Trust within the community, trust within the neighborhood.
Right.
Right. Having a nice base of family and friends supporting what it is that we're doing, and so I kind of I feel like I had a chance to use that equity and used it on Southside First. Right?
Okay.
And they're doing a lot of the stuff I was saying early on that there wasn't that support for Southside businesses. Southside First is doing a fantastic job doing that, right?
That's great.
So trying to connect that dot, right? And that came out of that first part of that story about no resources.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that was when I was doing it, I was like, oh, we really needed
That's right. You knew firsthand from there that there's no resources, so you get to be able to fill that hole.
But I think the turning point in how we got into Southside Craft Soda was really when I was able to mull over San Antonio's economic development data, raw data.
Right.
What I would call data without a script. You know what I mean?
What do you call that's interesting. Define that for me. What is data without a script?
So when a university or an institution is extracting data, right?
Sure.
They're getting all the demographics and everything, right? Somebody has to interpret it and interpret it to a group of public policymakers or chambers of commerce. So they have to add a narrative.
Sure, they're usually answering a question.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And so when I was looking over it, the epiphany in my head was, who interprets the data that we're receiving?
Sure.
Right. And then from what lens are they looking at that data from? Right.
Yeah.
And are we as a community on the South Side, right, in particular, do we have our own data sets? And how are we interpreting the data?
Interesting.
Right? And how are we creating our narrative from our lens?
Right.
And what does that look like, right, versus what's being told to us? And so which is actually a really fun, exciting exercise.
If you're a non-politician.
Yeah, if you're a non-politician. So I was able to team up with Dr. Antonio Petrov at the UTSA Future Lab.
Okay.
Some folks over at Trinity, and we're just getting this, this data on economic growth and economic development, and it dawned on me that South Texas and San Antonio is truly a community of makers, right?
Explain that for me.
Meaning that we are creative with food. We're creative with crafts. We're
Got it.
that we can make stuff.
That's right.
Right. But yet, in the economic development model or strategy, right, that's not really one of those core economic development tenets or not part of our model of.
That's right. It's not what the economic. We're not looking necessarily for. Not manufacturing jobs, but what you're talking about, like the maker jobs, right? We don't focus a lot on that. Those are somewhat the relics of an older economy that has changed over there. What's come in the place of that is you've got smaller, more creativity, as opposed to the large manufacturing jobs. I mean, look, the Pearl used to be a large manufacturer of beer, and it's now something else.
Right.
But we haven't come back in to grab what is left of that type of industry, which is the smaller independent, maker manufacturers that are there as well, developing something.
Right. And I think that there's I think that when the military bases closed, it created this vacuum.
Sure.
Right. And also when the military bases were here, especially on the South Side, a lot of our makers went and worked for the government.
Sure.
And a lot of those traditions and all of that kind of went away.
Yep. They went into the hospitality business. They went into the military jobs that were there, medical. Right. Those kind of institutional jobs minus the hospitality. That's where everybody shifted into.
Right. And so those artisans, that maker left. But I think you're starting to see the beginnings of it now with pop-up markets and that is sort of the culture.
Well, and Blue Star kept it alive, because it always became. I mean, now you see a lot of pop-up markets, but Blue Star and really the South Side of San Antonio kept that culture alive, of where you could find the makers, which is a great way to. That's a great way to describe that, the makers.
And so then, I believed that when you look at the goals of the city in terms of economic development, where you're looking at advanced manufacturing or bioscience or tech, right?
Right.
All those are those. There's an ecosystem.
That's right.
And so part of that ecosystem is, I always felt like there's this middle ground that was missing.
Sure.
Right. Is the middle ground is craft manufacturing. Right. That's the middle ground.
Okay.
And we just are not. We don't have a lot of that. That's the food or beverage startup. That's the small inventor, right, in that middle space that is given the opportunity to test, to build, to create in a sector that's different than what's being sort of promoted.
Sure.
Right. And I think that's the space that I felt like was missing, and why Southside Craft Soda for me was sort of an experiment, or sort of was a way for me to kind of say, look, you can do these things from this part of town, but there are things missing. What are they? I'm not quite sure. Hold my soda. Let me figure this. let me figure out what's missing.
Right.
Because I always feel like I'm more of a street scientist. I'm trying to extract data. I'm trying to understand why these things don't work or why they work.
Right.
And so Southside Craft Soda was birthed out of sort of all that you just heard, and then looking at this data and going like, what's missing here is I'm pretty good at what I'm doing, but I don't have the necessary resources to become really good at what I'm doing from where I'm at. Right.
Yeah.
And so in knowing that I learned this from Dr. Petrov, right? And he's really the kind of, he always gave me these nuggets that were like, ooh, for a long time, the South Side was always trying to like be the North Side. Oh, they got the North. Oh, they've got this and they've got that. Right. And that was a long time that, right? Versus just saying, look, no, we are who we are, and this is just be us. Right. We don't need to be anybody else. Let's just be the best us we can be. And so then what I'm saying is, okay, we're now identifying, South San Antonio is changing, and they're starting to be like, this is us, right? This is who we are. Now it's like, well, who are they? Who is us? And in San Antonio in general, who is us, and what do we need to do to help support these types of startups, right? These types of innovators,
right?
Because you and I could look to, think of something as random as OtterBox.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just think it's like they're a multi-million-dollar company,
right?
If he had invented that in South San Antonio, would it become OtterBox? Right? I don't know, right? But that's kind of the point. Is like, if there's somebody out there inventing something, if there's somebody out there innovating food or beverage, if there's somebody doing something, what are we doing to support those innovators? Right? And a lot of that comes out of that craft movement,
right?
That craft manufacturing, the person at the pop-up that's created. Like, how does that person now take that, or the person even deeper at the flea market?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
That, like, what are we doing to make sure that they know that hey, here, if you need it, we're here to support you.
Right.
Because we don't really do that right now.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of been my mission with Southside Craft Soda, was to kind of bring that up to the forefront, demonstrate that, very blatant, named it Southside.
Right.
Very strategically made it a quality product, right? All those things that I believe that we are.
Sure.
And then just with a great team and the great network and friends, Alamo Beer, all these, able to place it in 110 HEBs, be in central markets, right? And not to say that it was easy. I just think the market in HEB was like, oh, all right, finally.
Right.
It's like, oh, somebody showed up to the game. It's a quality product. We understand the business.
Right.
It looks great. Now what we have to do is we have to be able to kind of continue that growth, and then ultimately, I think, build our own facility and continue to demonstrate that these things are possible, and that the next wave of entrepreneurs, the next wave of food and beverage and makers can come around, and we can continue to build that community. Not unlike a geekdom.
Sure.
Right? It's very similar.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Talk about the brand, because we've talked about the journey and the creation of it. Brand's very strong on there. Talk about the Southside Craft Soda brand. What's your brand, not necessarily brand strategy, but how did you come up with it? And maybe even, how did you come up with it?
Yeah, well, it actually stems from hanging around Alamo Beer, right? And being a part of the research of Alamo Brewery and understanding how the brand worked in San Antonio.
Okay.
And how the brand worked with Texans.
Okay.
Right? And so if you love history like I do, we understand that the missions on the south side were the cowboy and the Longa de Vaquero and all that. That's kind of rooted in that Texas cowboy history.
Sure.
And it's a very Texas story.
Mm-hmm.
Our legacy, our family is deep rooted in South San Antonio. We all come from the missions in Old San Antonio, and really, 300 years in the area on the Spanish Tejano side, right? Indigenous, we've been here forever.
Right.
But we were the formation of that Texas culture. And so one thing that I do know about Texas, and you know this now, Texans love their Texas.
That's true.
They love Texas. Like, we love Texas.
That's right.
And so I really was trying to find a brand name. And our first soda, we had a bunch of stuff we were working on. I really tried to find a brand name that I want to play to our strengths, right? And again, this is something that I think I learned working with Petrov and, like, what are our strengths? What are you really good at?
Right.
Okay, let's play to those strengths.
Sure.
So San Antonio, I think, has like 26 million visitors a year.
Yeah.
And the Alamo gets like 3 million a year. And I said, gosh, it'd be great if we could create a craft soda that was inspired by South Texas in some way. And if I could find a cool name that was very Texas-y that I could trademark,
right,
then all we want to do is sell that to tourists on the Riverwalk.
Okay.
that was it. Pretty straightforward, simple.
Sure.
So then Greg, my co-founder, he is a CIA Culinary Institute of America Hyde Park graduate.
Okay.
He's an executive chef and he's a brewer and he's an all, probably one of the best flavor guys in San Antonio, born and raised here. When I told Greg, I said, "Hey man, this is what I'm looking for." He created a cola with real citrus from the valley.
Okay.
And there was a moment where we were like, we got to come out with our first soda, and I said, make the citrus cola less citrusy, and we kind of were having this battle, like, what is a cola?
Yeah.
Right. Like, what is a cola?
That'd been an interesting battle to listen to.
Yeah. And so we kind of went through like this idea, and then I went home and I go, a cola is whatever the hell we say it is.
That's true. It's kind of like, what's a beer?
Yeah.
Right? It used to be a beer was Miller Lite, Bud Light, Natty Light.
Yeah.
Now a beer, or you go to whiskey. I saw a barbecue whiskey the other day.
Yeah,
and I'm
it's like
a barbecue whiskey and peanut butter whiskey? Yeah. Whiskey's whiskey, right? Soda's soda.
Yeah. So it's like, what the hell? It's like, it is what it is. So I said, we'll just use the citrus cola that you have, and it's a cola with citrus in it.
Yeah.
So there it was.
It was.
And then really, the limoncitos based on an agua fresca.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Again, very Texas, really pushing. And the other thing too is familiar flavors.
Sure.
So I don't have to explain too much to the customer.
Right.
Right. I think early on, somebody read somewhere a long time ago that everybody wants to be different. If you're just good, that'll make you different.
Sure.
Right. Just be good at what you're doing, and you'll be different. And I think that's kind of the way I felt about this. Was we could go into some complex flavors. We could create things that I would have to explain what it was and how to approach it.
Right.
But I think that our brand lives on the shelves at H-E-B, and this is something that I learned from the Adams work, right? Because I did heavy packaging with them, and we did a lot of work on a lot of spices. That brand has to tell the story when you're not there.
Sure.
That package has to resonate with the customer when you're not there to tell the story.
That's right.
And then the brand names, especially in our space, was important. Texacola.
Right.
Right. So it's a cola. Limoncito, it's a lemon. Root bear, it's like, it's a root. Like, okay,
yeah.
I got it. Right. And they're fun. It's memorable.
Sure.
Packaging stands out on the shelf.
Right.
And it's authentic.
Right.
Right. It's real. It's authentic. And when you can achieve those things, right, that's a very difficult thing to accomplish.
Sure.
It's all about experience and being like, there's some things that you do as an attorney that, that you eventually you get good at it.
Yeah.
And I think that, Greg being a fantastic maker with my consumer package design and marketing branding background, we're able to stand that up at a high level rather quickly.
Yeah.
And there's just so much it's just so much more that we can do. And I think that's kind of the stage that we're at. It's like, God, this is just, I think we just barely scratched the surface.
Well, let me ask you some questions here, just because you've been through a lot. Your experience is rich in a variety of things. So let me ask you this, and if you need a minute, I get it, just to kind of through, but if somebody's a maker, okay, let's go with that. The maker of their creating some sort of goods that they're going to sell, whether it's in the consumer packaged good arena, the CPG arena, or maybe it's just in retail, right? What would be the biggest advice? What's the number one advice that you would give them regarding getting going with their goods?
I think that getting it out, your concept to as many people as possible, right? When we would serve soda, and this is out of the jockey box, kind of watch people's reaction.
Yeah.
I was watching folks, right? And when they taste it, you could see in their eye, right? If they drank all of it, that was a good sign, right? And that was my own sort of consumer data, right? You want to approach it like this is going to evolve,
okay?
Right? This is going to right now. I'm going to give you version 1, right? And it may not be if it's the perfect version on the first shot, you're God. You're God, right? Because everything about that product is just something's going to change by the time it's ready to go to the final stage. Maybe the package is different. Maybe the name is different. Maybe and you have to kind of go through these iterations. And when you have it at small scale, it's a lot easier to be nimble,
right?
To kind of make those adjustments. I also think that we underestimate our friends and family as market data, consumer data.
That's right, especially in the, I would say, food and beverage industry.
Right.
Because, somebody makes you, some dinner and you got to eat it once and you're like, hey, this is really good, versus somebody that's a stranger that's going to give you honest feedback.
Right.
So, I think that's great advice, which is, it sounds like for makers is do your own consumer testing as early as possible.
Yeah, right. And I think that saves you a lot of headache down the road. I've seen it, right? My wife's a maker, and I've seen her variations of things that she does, and it's very similar paths in terms of how we got the product to the market.
Right.
With the name, what do you think of this name? What do you think of that name? I'll go through a bunch of that versions several times. Can you pronounce this? If I showed you this, can you say this? Okay. Right. So there's a lot of that. And then finally I get down to no great company that's in the history of companies in America has done it by themselves. Right. And I think that's also something that I see. I know it's your baby, right? I know that there's all these things about it, but there's a moment where you just got to say, okay, I need help.
Sure.
I need to take this to the next level.
Right.
I might need to either, get an investor. Mm-hmm. I might need to find a partner. Right. Right. Don't push that off the table because it just, you could toil for a long time.
That's true.
Right. And the way I view it is, personally, is I got tons of ideas. Let's just keep moving. Let's see what happens. Let's get it. We'll keep working, and eventually, we'll get it perfect. I don't. Those early stages, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for whether I've got a good idea. Yeah. Or not.
Right. You're looking for feedback and validation. Right.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Because, eventually you'll get to the point where you think you have enough validation and less feedback. And that's the point where you're like, okay, it's time to go.
That's it.
You're one of our first guests. In fact, you might be our first guest on the consumer product goods, the CPG side. And what we see in the technology, which we've had a lot of technology companies in here, we've had chefs in here, is they get going. Right. As opposed to you're never going to perfect it and then get going. You're going to toil. That's a great word, right? Yeah. You're going to toil in that time frame, but getting going and seeking feedback and validation on different elements until you get enough that you think it's time to scale.
Right.
That's huge. Let me ask you another question on the marketing side. Again, kind of some lessons for some viewers, for the viewers that will see this, which is when it comes to consumer product design of your packaging, what is the number one thing that you look for or think about when doing that sort of design?
These are little billboards, right?
Yeah.
These are little billboards on the shelf. And you got to imagine that somebody's walking by with their cart. You know, that's not even a bad exercise. Just kind of like looking over and did that catch my attention?
Right.
I think the brand names, the brand names are very important in this space. Being able to articulate what it is that you have as quickly as you can on the brand is really important. However you do that, but I think that in terms of packaging, you got to go look at your shelf space, where you think you're going to be on shelf, and kind of look at color patterns and what other people are looking like on the shelf, because you know you're going to be next to those products.
Sure.
Right? And so is there a way to differentiate? And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it costs a lot because I'm going to differentiate, and then you realize you just increased your cost because now you're really different. But then your price got to mimic that. But then sometimes you're in the section where nobody's priced that high. You know, it's just, so I mean, then you got to really express value, and so you kind of create these other challenges that come along with that that you didn't think about at the beginning. And so that's what I would say. It's the brand name's important. Being able to read it on a grocery shelf.
I never thought of them like little mini billboards out there. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question, which is, I mean, you've got rich experience. You've been with big brands. You've been with, brands, as you were saying, that have been on the growth trajectory with Alamo. Of course, Southside Craft Soda is a brand that y'all have had from birth that is moving on there. What's the biggest lesson you've learned so far through all this?
Oh.
And I'm sure there's a lot.
Wow.
Maybe what's the biggest?
I think you're gonna laugh because my wife laughed at me too. She's like, "Is there any advice?" I said, "Learn to pray."
That's great advice.
I said, "There's just so many things that are out of my control."
Which is true.
There is so many things out of my control that if I try to control it all, I'm gonna go nuts. And so there are important things to do today, and there are not important things to do today, and there are things that I just cannot control. And so the moment I try to do it, I kind of get distracted, and I'm off of what I need to get done. So I would say the biggest lesson would be to do what I know I can do, to control what I can control, right? And I used to do this in my marketing company all the time. It's like I didn't feel like things were going my way. I thought I was having a bad day, so I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna do social media today because I know I can do that today, and at least I'll feel accomplished by the end of the day.
Right.
Maybe do some content, right, and maybe build some momentum, get me back on a positive. But I'm gonna tell you, like right now, for the craft soda company, the amount of trust that I have to have from vendors to distributors to customers, right? I have to sales guys that work and salespeople that work at the distributor,
right?
Like I was trying to do the count the other day, and it's just like, even though we're a small company, we probably have over, when you count the people that are making it at the factory you're probably in the 50 to 60 people range of people that are touching the product at some level, right?
Right.
And so you have to trust that everybody loves what they're doing, but they do. And I'm going to tell you that is the coolest moment I think of is when the truck driver comes, and when they said they're going to come, and they're coming from Dallas. to pick up some stuff, and they show up, and you get the stuff on the truck, and it's so off, and then 2 weeks later it's on the shelf, and you're just going like, isn't that amazing? Like, isn't that amazing? Like, that the trust,
yeah,
right? And so when I get upset now, it's usually because now I have that experience along the chain. It's like we all need each other, right? I'm doing my part. I need you to do your part, and the next person's gonna do their part. If we don't do that, then a lot of livelihoods are at stake, and you want to make sure that everybody. So teamwork, and I think that makes me really. It's one of those things I think we take for granted.
Sure.
And then when you're in it, you're like, wow.
People don't realize the supply chain is actually how we get food. If not, we'd have to literally go slaughter the cow ourselves to make our hamburger versus
and the gas,
supply chain that gets us directly to our house now, literally on your front step with delivery.
Right.
Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing. I'm a big fan, and I know there's so many big fans that are out there, so we've been really excited to have you to come on today. We wish you the best of luck. And for those that are watching here, there's going to be all sorts of links and stuff, and check out your local HEB because there's more than likely it's sitting on that shelf. Find that billboard as they're going by. The man created the billboard there, and I'm sure they'd love to hear some feedback and validation of all the great things that they're doing.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Wow, I hope you enjoyed that just as much as I do. We are so proud to educate and support our community here in South Texas. And this is just another example of a great founder that is doing great things that we love to highlight here on the South Texas Power Lunch. Now make sure you subscribe. As the South Texas Business Lawyers, we look forward to supporting and educating every single small business owner. And by subscribing, you won't miss out on all of the free education and information that we send out almost every single day. So subscribe now and don't miss out.